Competitive play for IACP Skirmish is in full swing for Season 9, with a tournament and a month of competitive online league play now in the books. And with a new map in rotation coinciding with the start of Season 9 competitive play, something is happening in players' list building that many of us had been predicting might happen ever since Season 7, with the introduction of the card Smuggling Compartment. At the end of the FFG meta and before IACP, spy figures were not very good. The only spies that really saw any tournament play after Tyrants of Lothal came out were Leia Organa, Ahsoka Tano, and arguably Jared Kelvin, sort of. But all of these were considered to be low-tier figures in the tournament meta. Mac Eshgare and cross-training on a Riot Trooper or Jet Trooper were actually considered to be the gold standard for spy figures at the time, because it required the fewest points investments to be able to unlock the powerful disruption cards of Intelligence Leak and Strategic Shift. These cards were considered so powerful at a time when armies would regularly spend multiple turns focusing up and building up their hands of command cards that it was justifiable to spend 1 to 3 deployment points just to gain access to these spy cards, especially Strategic Shift, which could reduce your opponent's hand to just 2 cards with a single action, no matter how many cards they had at the start. When IACP came along, the philosophy was that we didn't want there to be bad cards or bad figures. We wanted everything to be somewhat competitively viable to some degree. IACP Season 4 and 5 ended up introducing a lot of great spy figures into the skirmish game. Not because we were trying to make spies really good. These were just characters and units that we wanted to see in the game that just so happened to make a lot of sense as spies, either because of their lore or because FFG had already made them spies in their original designs. The unforeseen consequence of this, however, was that it was now easier than ever to just inadvertently have a spy on your list to be able to play any of the powerful spy cards without needing to sacrifice any combat efficiency in your army to do so, which you had to do in the past when you included a figure like Mac for 3 points. And the only way to stop your opponent from hitting you with a devastating strat shift was to either play out your cards early in a premature attack that would leave you overextended and probably in a worse position anyway, or play your own spy figures and spy cards like Intel Leak or Comm Disruption to stop the strat shift directly.
Everything's under control, situation normal.
Meaning that the only answer to spies in this new metagame were more spies, which just made the problem worse for everyone else that wasn't playing spies, because there were now more spies to have to deal with. Especially after Season 5, it was becoming obvious that we needed to do something to fix this problem that we had created. Rather than nerfing Strategic Shift or any of the other spy cards, we decided that protecting yourself against hand disruption should be a choice that players made during list building, just like it was a choice to include a spy in your list and include spy cards in your deck in the first place. In other competitive deck building or list building games, this is called teching, which is including a card in your deck just for helping out against a certain bad matchup. After a lot of different ideas for how to make an anti-spy card, we finally ended up with the card Smuggling Compartment, which was released in Season 7, which can protect your hand from Intelligence Leak and Strategic Shift, as well as other non-command card-based disruption like Agent Blaze and Headhunter. But it doesn't protect you from cards like Negation and Comms Disruption, nor does it protect your deck from things like Strain or Grand Admiral Thrawn's ability. It was important that we also included a useful secondary ability on the card which would help it be somewhat useful even in matchups without enemy spies. You see this on cards like Doubt, another card that was designed as an anti-focus card, but has a secondary ability that lets you deplete it to reroll an opponent's attack dice. The secondary ability we included on Smuggling Compartment had to be something that wasn't quite good enough to be worth 1 point on its own, but good enough that the card didn't feel completely useless when there weren't any spies in the opponent's list. I really like where the second ability ended up because it actually synergizes really well with lists that are relying on finding a few specific command card combos to set up game-winning plays, as those types of lists are especially weak to spy disruption. We counted on the fact that Smuggling Compartment is a generally useful card on its own for the secondary ability because even just the existence of such a card as Smuggling Compartment means that including cards like Intelligence Leak and Strategic Shift in your deck and taking up valuable deck slots and command points could suddenly mean you might have cards in your deck that are close to being useless. Thus, the existence of Smuggling Compartment benefits even the lists that don't include it, because it scares a decent number of players into reconsidering how much hand disruption they want to include in their deck. This would then theoretically create a loop. As fewer players put spy cards in their decks, afraid of playing against Smuggling Compartment, more players will decide that they can forgo spending that 1 point on Smuggling Compartment and use that 1 point to make their list better against everything else. Then, as all the spy players notice that less people are playing Smuggling Compartment and are afraid of spy cards in general, they might decide to play those cards again, especially in a big tournament or an important game where they can use the surprise factor to get a big advantage over players that think spy cards are out of fashion or irrelevant. Then everyone remembers that Smuggling Compartment exists and put it back into their lists, and we see spy cards recede again, which conditions players over time to start disrespecting spy cards again, and thus the cycle repeats. Or alternatively, spy players that really want to control their opponent's hands and command cards will have to double down to overwhelm the Smuggling Compartment ability, which is an exhaust, it can only be used once per round. They'll have to run more than one group of spies and or bring more disruption than just Strategic Shift, which mean more points out of their lists and more slots out of their command decks dedicated to hand disruption. This is also a positive outcome for the game because it means that players are having to commit more to the strategy and have to deal with more opportunity costs to do so. And we like this because it means more variety in decks out there where people aren't just splashing the strongest cards from each different type. They actually have to commit to making their list one specific type or strategy. Interestingly, that cycle didn't really happen until just recently. In Season 9, we have a new set of 3 tournament maps with the rotation of Tarkin Initiative Labs rotating out for the ISB Training Grounds. 2 of the maps in rotation, Waska Hunting Grounds and the new ISB Training Grounds, have big, wide open areas in the middle with very little cover to advance. This has been a departure from the maps we tend to favor in IACP and much more similar to the maps that were around at the end of the FFG era, specifically Mos Eisley back alleys and Lothal wastes. If you try to move towards your opponent's deployment zones on these types of maps, you most likely won't be able to attack at the end of your movement, while your opponent can then easily pop out and blast you before you can reach them. Because of this, it's very important to wait until the right moment when the initiative token is coming to you in the next round to move in at the end of the current round, and that way reduce how many of your opponent's figures are left to activate and can shoot at you. All of that waiting means players are building up large hands of command cards, which makes cards like Strategic Shift very powerful. Players active in the online Vassal League for Season 9 in our IACP Discord have picked up on this. The online Vassal League has been a wonderful little competitive pressure cooker for strategies, as players playing in the league try out their best strategies against each other and try to come up with ways to beat the best strategies that they encounter. I've already seen and heard in discussions that players are having that they are now realizing that you need to put Smuggling Compartment in your list if you can't win from having your 8-card hand strat shifted down to 2 cards. There's too much pressure on Waska and ISB to not attack until you have the advantage of the initiative token coming your way. This has led players to publicly stating that it's no longer worth it to include strat shift in their list because once everyone figures out they should be running Smuggling Compartment. But those players have also tried to run things like Agent Blaze and Intelligence Leak to overwhelm Smuggling Compartment, which we have even heard happen in Adepticon with Brendan, who was able to bait out a smuggling compartment usage with his strategic shift just so he could play intel leak on his next spy activation. Strangely though, our data seems to indicate that Smuggling Compartment is maybe less played after the map rotation at the start of March. However, it's important to remember that 17 out of the 55 games recorded since ISB Training Grounds rotated in are from the March 11th tournament, in which players were not allowed to change their deployment cards. So the tournament players have not been able to adjust their list to adapt to the meta just yet. But it will be interesting to see what the lists look like once April and May tournaments happen and players have a chance to adjust their lists to the new meta. I hope you enjoyed this brief look at the fluctuating metagame involving spies and counterplays to spies, and how the map rotation has really shaken things up. Skirmish is a lot of fun, and I really love competitive Skirmish, so I hope you guys enjoy this video. Let me know in the comments what you think about spy cards and IACP, and what you think about countering cards like spy cards with new cards, or if it's better to nerf them instead. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and we'll catch you for the next video.